And for more on this story, I'm joined by Michael Waheed Hanna, U.S. Program Director at Crisis Group. Thanks so much for being with us here on France 24. I want to ask you about the board itself, but first, is there any indication based on what we saw today that Donald Trump's Board of Peace can help facilitate the peace process in Gaza, especially considering that the Palestinians are not even a part of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think to begin with, there have been real questions about the way forward. There are big unanswered questions on governance, on security, things like the disarmament of Hamas. And I think people were expectant, some anticipation to hear if there was more of a concrete roadmap about how to get from the kind of fantastical plans for reconstruction that have been put on the table to implementation. And I think that's the thing that has been lacking. And despite the numerous pledges that were mentioned on troop contributions, on funds for reconstruction, there's still a lack of detail about how to get there. And so I think we're still quite a ways off from seeing these pledges materialize into concrete facts on the ground.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about money today. We mentioned that Trump, the members have pledged $7 billion for reconstructing Gaza. But how much of a focus is there on diplomacy and achieving peace here?
Well, I mean, there are big questions on disarmament, say. This is at the heart of what comes next. Israel has made it a red line. Trump has reiterated that point. And of course, nothing will materialize in terms of reconstruction funds or deployments without some assurances on this front. And this is diplomacy, frankly, that just hasn't happened yet. It has to happen if we are to see this ceasefire move from the current phase 2, despite the fact that there are sort of daily military strikes. We have seen a taming of the military conflict. But if we are to see the ceasefire advance beyond this phase 2 to phase 3, these are the kinds of questions that have to be answered. And the diplomacy to get there, frankly, just isn't taking place at the moment.
Now, Trump claimed that members of his board have committed thousands of personnel to a peacekeeping force in Gaza, 8,000 troops from Indonesia, we heard. Is there any clarity on how such a force might work?
There's not. Again, many unanswered questions. This is one of them. The Board of Peace's mandate in Gaza is defined by the United Nations Security Council. There is a resolution that gives it a kind of specific legal mandate. So it is well within its rights to operate in Gaza. But the details of how a stabilization force would work, what would be its rules of engagement, what would be its specific mandate in the Strip. These are things that haven't been defined yet and clearly have to be negotiated with the troop contributing countries. And these are the kinds of questions that remain that I think make speculation about what comes next really quite difficult because, again, we have pledges, but very little guidance about how these things would operate in practice.
Can we talk about the funding of this Board of Peace? For now, many of the leaders who've agreed to pay this $1 billion initiation fee, they run military regimes or dictatorships. First of all, what is that money being used for? You may not know this. And what do you think these leaders expect in return?
Yeah, I mean, it's notable who is not part of the Board of Peace, of course. The traditional U.S. allies have not joined. I think the kind of core Arab group, many of the states who have the most at stake in terms of seeing a Gaza ceasefire succeed have joined. And I think that's a reflection of a bet, effectively, that they have made from the beginning of the Trump administration, which really accelerated after Israel's strike on Hamas officials in Doha in September, which really spurred the ceasefire diplomacy. And the bet is very simple. These states believe that they need an engaged United States. They need an engaged Donald Trump, and a Donald Trump that is willing to use his influence and leverage with Israel to move the process forward. Now, whether that happens, whether U.S. engagement is sustained, whether the United States is willing to work as a kind of impartial mediator between the parties, again, open questions. But this is the bet that many of the regional leaders have made, that they want to keep Donald Trump engaged and focused on a potential peacemaking achievement. And I think there is a hope, at least, that because he has invested his own prestige and credibility in this effort, that he would be reluctant to see the ceasefire in Gaza collapse under his watch.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Michael Waheed Hanna, U.S. Program Director at Crisis Group. Thanks so much for joining us here on France 24. We appreciate it.